Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transforming their business. And I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest episode with Maggie Sarfo, an award-winning consultant driving revenue growth for SMEs, entrepreneur, writer, and speaker. Maggie is a fellow judge at the National Best Businesswomen Awards, which I also have the privilege to judge. So I've gotten to know her really well, and we're very pleased to have her here. So Maggie, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Romesh. I'm really good, and I'm really excited for our conversation today as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So to start off with, can you tell us briefly about your career to date?
So the simplest way of saying it is the initial 8 years of my career was spent in doing a variety of things. I guess I was discovering what I wanted. I was trained as a business consultant, but I did that. So I did a combination of that with media, working with the likes of WPP and a few others, even going into sales and marketing for membership organizations. Then the next 8 years, I moved into sales and sales leadership because a part of me did not understand why I would be paid a normal salary. So I wanted some commission. So I moved into sales and sales leadership, and also working predominantly in the tech world. And then the last 8 years, I've been an entrepreneur, building on all those strengths and focusing still on growth. And I do say that if it's to do with growth, whether personal or business, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. And that's me.
Brilliant. Maggie, you do a lot. Okay, as we were meeting beforehand, networking, talks, books, digital transformation, sales, AI. How do you juggle all that as an entrepreneur and a founder in your business? And how do you find the kind of focus and energy?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of hinted it in terms of how I bring it all together. And I tie that under the word of growth, and I focus on revenue growth. But for me, I feel that, businesses grow at the same rate as the owners are willing to develop as, or the leaders are willing to develop as people. That's why the personal growth also comes in. How I bring it all, how I juggle all of that is manage my calendar and also have a very good VA. So I show up in the places I need to show up, but there is something happening in the background, and I feel I'm very lucky to be able to be doing all of that. I'm that kind of person. I need to have a few balls juggling, otherwise I get bored.
Typical founder that's going for it. You obviously talk about revenue as your thread. What are some of the trends you're seeing or within SMEs and how their challenges are in generating revenue, and what's your kind of experience in how you can help these people?
So I think we are in that. I want to use the word flux, but then I do wonder if is the right word in that state of flux where you wonder, there's something you've always done, it's always worked, and you wonder if it's still working or if it's still not working. But then again, for a long time, we've seen how business buyers are looking to buy just like consumers, and I think as a result, technologies have also overtaken all of those angles, and now business buyers buy the same as consumers do. And so for SMEs, I think is a case of really looking at what is not broken and not trying to break it because there's a hype somewhere. And then looking at what you need to do so you don't miss out on opportunities that are coming up because of the flow. A very simple example is managing the customers, really. So those conversations that we have with people, that we have with our clients, our customers, our suppliers, our stakeholders, they need to carry on in a way that creates that meaning in that relationships. And I think the more we can emphasize that and then add whatever processes and technologies that need to come on top of that, that will help. But
yeah, are you talking about really testing the pipeline management in effect? Because there are companies who use traditional sales teams versus emails versus websites, and are you saying, some of it might work, some of it might start to be broken, but there's also new ways of doing things? Don't jump onto the new things, but also keep exploring.
Absolutely, yeah.
And do you see founders doing one or the other? Is there a trend? Are they jumping from new idea to new idea, or are they very static, or does it massively depend on the types of businesses they run?
I think it depends, but then also it depends on the founder, right? I mean, we all have areas that we are stronger at. So, for instance, it's one of the reasons why, sitting alongside a founder who is very technical, would normally look at, what do we need to do from a business head, go-to-market, revenue kind of thing. Whereas if we have a founder who is already kind of very focused on go-to-market, going big, where are my markets, blah, 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 then you have to pull them back and say, okay, then you need looking at the structure so that you can be ready to scale when you're ready to scale. So I think it's a balance, but most of the time a founder will veer towards what they know best, and it's important for them to then look at what it takes for them to have a more rounded team at the top and see how that scales the revenue of the business.
Super interesting. Yeah, I agree with that, actually. I think it's and do you see it harder at the moment for companies to manage their pipeline? Do you think it's harder than it's ever been, or do you think the technology is making it more confusing rather than harder, or are people consuming products differently in the business world?
It's harder in the sense that not until you and try and you have tested a scenario, a sales process, and a methodology that works for you. You're always in that state of, why did this deal come in? Why did the other not come in? And why did that come in? And where should we put our resources? Because again, the more you invest your resources in an area, if it doesn't give you what you want, then, in a way, could it have been put somewhere else? It can be easier, but I think it's about testing and seeing what works for you and putting more resources into that. Technology, AI especially, it can make it easier, but in combination with everything else that you've got going on, and you don't want to just throw resources at stuff because it's a hype. That's what I'll say. Is it harder? It's a combination, but there's a lot of noise, and that's probably why it's becoming harder. What do you think? What are you seeing, Mike?
I've seen some interesting things. I saw a paper last year around how, you mentioned this, business to consumers, right? Consumer markets, they're very on demand nowadays. They want something.
Yeah.
Whereas in the business world, it's traditionally you'd create a relationship, you build a funnel, and over a period of time you close a deal, and there's kind of a process to that.
Yeah.
I think business world's changed now. People are watching companies they might want to have in their supply chain, and then suddenly they want to go.
Yeah.
There's not kind of that natural funnel process that traditional sales pipelines are used to, which means companies need to just be ready in the background, keep sharing information, keep engaging, and then suddenly that business will move when they want it.
Yeah, and again, that has been a trend that has been going on for at least 8 years. It's probably speeding up now, but we talked about how the buyer's journey is moving and how business buyers are trying to behave like consumers. And the research always said that 85% was done by the buyer rather than the business or the salespeople. And so you need to make sure that you are giving them the information, just like you're describing, in the background, because your influence on their buying decision is probably 10%, if not less. And so, and again, I think what you have hinted at there is the speed at which they then decide to buy when they're ready. And again, with AI thrown in the mix, then it's a case of, again, is your information also available in AI? Because I attended a very interesting enablement conference recently where some speakers were talking about how they are seeing businesses buy. And they talked about a couple of really good solutions that were missed out in that process, in terms of they were not considered by the buying team because this company or these two companies had not educated the AI, and this company was just buying through AI. So
Interesting.
yeah. So yeah. so there is a lot going on. But yeah, it comes back to, yes, the business buyer wants to buy like a consumer. And then what has been the other thing on top of it is the speed at which they buy when they're ready. And so what are you doing as a business owner, as an SME business owner, startup, scale up? What are you doing to make sure that they are considering you as part of their buying process? And then when they're ready to buy, they actually say to themselves, we just can't afford not to go with these guys. What are you saying to them? Or what are you putting out there? And that's not just you, it's what your customers, the noise, when we talk about customer listening scenarios, right? So what are your customers saying that your buyers are picking up that you have no direct influence on as well? So yeah, all of those things are happening, and they're happening on that larger scale if we're talking about business buyers, but they're also happening, even in the e-commerce space, the consumer space is happening, and the consumer space will always kind of be faster than the business buyer space because because it's consumer faster. Yeah.
What about your view, Romesh? Are you seeing this trend in the companies you're supporting? What's your opinion on this? I know you and I have talked about sales and marketing and how it's changing. What's your thoughts?
It's a really interesting discussion, isn't it? I think everyone ultimately is vying for your attention, as a consumer, as a business. And to Maggie's point, it's trying to filter out the noise, right? Because it is noise. If you're not careful, you kind of just get overwhelmed with what's out there. There's so much change. There's so many options. What works for you? So yeah, there is a lot of noise out there. I also think that the environment's a bit harder these days as well, which means that people are doubling down on the marketing or trying to, certainly, trying to make themselves better known. Are you seeing that, Maggie?
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And again, then is where do we put our marketing spend, right? What do we get, as what do we get for each £1 that we spend on marketing? And those are the days where marketers were just tasked with market conditioning, as their return, for the organization. These days, marketing is also taxed with direct growth, which means that, digital marketing is a real transactional space in terms of they're taxed with the lead generation and stuff. And then you see some of this tension between sales and marketing in terms of, oh, you generated me the leads, but I'm not sure if they are the right leads and all of those things. And I come into that space all the time. And it's about how do we make sure that they are all coming together and fulfilling just the one thing that they want to be doing as an organization or as a business together. So, yeah.
I liked what you were saying earlier, where you talked about there's still a need to build a relationship, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I like the kind of balanced approach that you're suggesting is effective, because I really believe in that. I think you have to adopt the technologies, the trends, you have to bring on board good processes to market to focus on growing revenues, but actually you've got to build relationships as well. Right? And I think that combination can be quite powerful. So I suppose, Mike, to answer your question, I think the most effective approach is that balance, and it's the businesses I'm seeing that are doing quite well are the ones who are looking to change, develop, get better, but also, to Maggie's point, understanding what has worked well in the past and can continue to work well. So stand on those pillars and keep driving off them with change. Good stuff. So Maggie, some really good insights there on the revenue growth piece, and obviously, as a fractional finance director, that's a great thing, and I totally applaud it. But I'm also obviously quite animated and looking at the bottom line, right?
Yes.
So have you encountered scenarios where companies might struggle because they are focused just on the growth side, but not necessarily also looking at the bottom line and understanding what their overall return is for that extra activity?
Yeah. And I think I'm one of the few who, when I look at growth, I also look at the bottom line. But I really know that, with a lot of revenue departments within organizations, we just look at that and then we go, oh, and the turnover was this, so that's great, right? It's got to be great. And we had X number of new customers, it's got to be great, right? Then I go, okay, but what is happening beneath that funnel in terms of, because I'm very big on retention, and so I think that the bottom line is more solid when you have customers or clients who are staying for much longer, and the portfolio is increasing in terms of they trust you, they are able to tell you more about what's happening, and if you can offer them a service or a product to solve that problem for them, you do. And if you can't, hopefully you refer them to someone else, but they still trust you, and that way you have longer term clients who keep spending more and more and more. And for me, it's a very effective way of maintaining the growth in a way that touches the bottom line directly, because you're not losing it through. But it's a real thing, and I do come across a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations where growth can be just go, let's throw resources at it and let's see what comes in, without looking at the whole in terms of what's happening on the net revenue as well.
It's something I'm quite animated about, I suppose, because I am a finance director ultimately, and for me, what is it, what's that phrase, is it sales vanity, profits are sanity? I mean, it's a bit of a roll your eyes cliche, but
know your numbers, Romesh, know your numbers. And then
exactly. Check out the cliches, but I think my challenge to the revenue generating team is, firstly, a sale's not a sale until the cash is in. that's how I look at things, because you have actually the cash flow point to consider, but also what does it actually mean for the business as a whole? That sale, is it a net increase to the business, or because you can just increase turnover but actually make a loss, right? So it's just understanding that and focusing the most profitable streams of income. That's how I like it.
How do you see the need? One of the biggest challenges in sales and marketing really is you can nearly link you can directly link an ROI to sales, but you can't really link an ROI to marketing. But obviously that's hard, much harder. And what's your view, Maggie, on how SME startups are thinking about a growth strategy? And you talk about revenue, not sales or marketing, how they need to intertwine that kind of process of sales and marketing. So we talked about educating the customer, rapid speed of buying. That changes it from a marketing-led approach more than a sales-led approach, right? What's your kind of view on how SME should think about doing that if they're looking to expand into new markets, new clients?
I think it's important to find and what do we say? Is it right word, the KPI? Like a performance indicator that directly links the sales and marketing activities together, and this feeds directly to the CEO's growth agenda at the top.
And would you propose a revenue role is a marketeer or a sales-led role, or would you depend on the business?
Would I propose a revenue role that's a marketeer?
Yeah, or a salesperson. It's a poisonous question, that, right?
No, because in a way they're merging is the reason why we see the term GTM now very popular now in go-to-market strategies. But you can't do the go-to-market by just separating sales from marketing. And that is also why now with marketing we're saying, okay, we need to give you a number rather than a market conditioning thing. And so how do we, because marketing obviously is more in charge of the digital footprint, but then sales is also becoming more and more digital. So where does one end? Where does one begin? Even though they're separate, I think that we always need to bring them in together, and it comes with communication. If I had to kind of do a magic wand thing, I would say interchange them. Right? Would I propose one that does one? I would say it will be really good for the sales leader, the revenue leaders to moving and work more closely with the marketing teams, and for the marketing teams leaders to the CMOs to work in and work directly with the CRO a bit more, or become a CRO for a while and see what it feels like. It's probably a concept rather than a but again, all ideas that become really good starts from concepts and ideas. But I think it's good for these two functions to function together if we want sustainable revenue that grows as well. So that's my take on it.
I think it's a good message for smaller startup businesses as well, because often they think in terms of a salesperson and a marketing person, whereas you're talking about think in terms of a go-to-market strategy. What's your buying journey? And therefore, what do you need in there, and how do those two fit together? Because it could be marketing prime and sales mop up the closure, or it could be vice versa. Either way, that's the kind of logic that you as a founder need to think about, not a role.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the guy with the black book who has a lot of connections. It's really good because connections and relationships are really important. But it's about really being clear about which point your buyer or your customer is buying. Is it, and where to put your resources and make sure they have the right information as they go through their process. And, sometimes at the time that they're starting, so I look at the customer journey and I say, this is the customer journey and this is the prospect journey. I broke that into two. But you might think a salesperson is talking to someone, so they are, somewhere, near, But then, if they find some information from the marketing team, it could be that is what catapulted them to close the deal quicker, right? So the two need to come together, and as a founder, you need to think about how these journeys are merging, and so it's not linear. It can go in different directions, and you have to make it easy for your buyer to find what they need and to make decisions quicker as well.
So the messaging I'm getting from this is that both disciplines, if you like, are, if they're to be effective, then they need to work in tandem.
Yeah.
They're complementary, aren't they? And they have to work together. And as you say, Maggie, you can prioritize and weight your activity on either side of that to make it work. And one thing I think that I'd add to it is that we talked about ROI and data, and again, finance director, of course. You know,
Yes.
I'm all about measurement.
You won't have it any other way.
But I also do think that there are elements of sales and marketing that you can't measure, that are more difficult, that are more intangible.
Yeah.
And I went on a voyage of discovery, you know, not that long ago, when I analysed where I was getting the clients for my business. And it was really interesting because I realised that actually there was a soft approach that I was employing in certain areas, which was proving quite effective. But I couldn't, you know, it's not a case of, okay, there's that channel, I'll throw money at it, I can look at the clients I get from it, and here are the sales. It's harder than that. And I think you just have to, my view of it is you have to build almost like a 360-degree wheel of different activities, most of which will be measurable, but others which you almost have to build a process and trust it for a while.
Exactly.
And then take a step back. Does that make sense? That resonates with you, Maggie?
It does, you know, because in some areas you will be giving rather than getting, but it will come together, right? So when you look at an activity like networking, for instance, you know, do you put a very hard number at it, or do you look at it as you building relationships, and, you know, you might not get a direct sale from it, but who knows, someone may introduce you to someone who then introduce you to someone else, and a conversation then goes, oh, well, they've been speaking to, oh, your name is familiar, your company name is familiar, and sometimes, you know, so it's about those. And so the 360-degree view of what your go-to-market is, or your growth strategy is, will then show some areas where you seem to be giving and not receiving, but there will be areas that you really receiving because you focused intentionally in terms of, this is what we give here to get this, but others will come in.
And that's more scientific. Okay. And that leads very nicely on to my next question, Maggie. It's almost like we planned it. I find it really interesting that you run a networking franchise, and we had a great episode some time ago with Stefan Thomas, who runs a networking group. We discussed. Oh, you do? Yeah, he's a great guy, isn't he? And we discussed the power of networking and how important it is for you and your business if you are a business leader. Can you maybe talk to us about why you think networking can be so powerful?
Yeah, I really think that the power of networking is multiple fold, right? Whereas, you know, with some of our activities to grow our businesses, you know, it might be more scientific. You know, there's a strategy and an execution plan, and we go with it. I think with networking, it's almost sometimes the opposite. If you focus too much on going into the room to sell, you might not build the right relationships. But I think personally, for instance, the franchise that I own in the City of London, when I started, I was like, well, I'm focusing more on this type of audience, and the people who are currently part of this network, they might not be my direct audience for my Mary's Consult business. However, I'm going to just look at it as a franchise on its own and see what comes out of it. Prior to that, people have said to me, one of the good ways of bringing business into your business is to have a network. And I didn't think it was necessarily the case in this instance. But it's so turned out that, looking back now, because I've had that franchise since 2018, I've had incredible crossover. In terms of people who then become clients in my other business, even though I don't necessarily sell too strongly this other business. And so it's that intangible personality thing that we're talking about. And, I did a video the other day talking about how people will spot you and go, oh, this person could be good for this thing that we're looking to do. And even though this person is not putting themselves out to say, I do this, they, that connection gets formed because they have a relationship with you. And based on that relationship, they know that if they need a service or a product that they feel you can provide, there is no one else. They will come to you. And the research always say that as well, because people will always buy from people they like, know, and trust. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm a real believer in that. I think one of the things that you alluded to is going out to help others, not being overly pushy in terms of sales. And I think that's a really good approach because it enables you to build trust and relationships meaningfully. And ultimately, yeah, I one of the best bits of advice I got when I when I set up my business was, Romesh, if you walk into a room and people like you, you're halfway there. So it's being authentic to yourself and creating those relationships. Mike, how do you find that approach?
You know my view, and I'm learning quite a lot about networking and where that should sit. And I think the interesting thing is, I'm going back to what you talked about earlier, Maggie, is having a good understanding of a go-to-market strategy is key. And if you see that it's a personality driven approach and you're trying to educate people on who you are as a person, these networking events are magic.
Yeah.
And I think some people shy away from it, but those people I know who've used it and it's worked, and I think Romesh is a good example here, it kind of can be a force multiplier that you maybe can't ROI. Because it actually gives you something more intangible than tangible. But I think actually that's really powerful for you as a business.
Yeah.
And Romesh and I often talk about strive and thrive sometimes, and we go, what we gain from it? And you realize you gain an interesting network of new people in lots of different domains. You can't qualify that in a pipeline management, as we were talking about previously, but you can qualify it in terms of really building a interesting cohort. And one of the things I was curious about with yourself is setting individuals and companies who have been thinking about networking. There's join other networks, that's one. But setting your own up is an interesting angle. And actually, you can set one up that orientates around something you're interested in. What was your experience setting up a franchise? And what would you recommend off the back of that for people thinking about setting up a network for themselves?
It's very interesting. My personal experience, owning a franchise that was already going on. So this franchise is 20 years this year. And I have had mine since 2018, so 7 years now. It's one of the best investments that I've made.
Wow. Okay.
It is, and I say this to them all the time. And for me, it's also, yes, I do get business from it, and then of course the franchise itself is set up in such a way that it's very profitable on its own as well. And then I also find that there are instances where I have advised clients to say, if you're trying to find a community and network that you don't seem to find it elsewhere, then perhaps, it's time for you to build one. And I advised a client about this almost a year ago. And now he is off this scale. He is really building a very unique community, because I spotted his personality as being very unique. And, and that was why he was struggling to find because he's got big ideas, most of which have not been done. And so some of the conversations I'm always having with him is, because he wants this kind of business model. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not there, but it can happen, because he's that kind of creative spirit and creative mind and big person, big picture person. I'm like, yes, we'll draw it, make sure we IP it with the right lawyer, and we'll take it to market. And yes, at some point, some people will, steal the idea, but at least we've IP'd it or trademarked it. So it's that. And so sometimes what you're looking for is there as a network, and I would say tap into it. As a franchise owner for the network, I also advise my members is an annual membership one. There's so many different types of it, and I advise them, if you are part of other networks, that's always fine, go ahead, but always look at how you look at ROI. Is your responsibility to look at ROI, because it does take a lot of time. It's still part of your resources.
And so if I wanted to set up my own network, what would be your kind of, with a franchise, it'll give you the backdrop, right? All the core components of it. But what are the factors you'd need to think about in sort of setting it up? And
I think if you're setting up your own network, it's because you've got a big vision, a big idea that you don't see anywhere. And so you've been trying to fit it into others and it's not working. So then be clear on that idea.
So test other networks first and see if there's a gap in the market of networks within. Is it locality or subject or both? Geographically, or
it's so it's geography, locality, as you're saying. Sometimes it's about being clear on what you're looking to achieve with that network. Let's look at it as a community. Do they hang out mostly online? Are they offline? Are they local? Are they, and what is it that brings them together? And are you able to pull that into a message that makes them go, I want to be a part of it, because it's a community. And so you need to be really, really clear on that, and then test it out, test it out. I was speaking to a guy who's formed an organization called the Portfolio Collective, and he was talking about how it was set up by accident and it's a thriving community now. And
they're usually wrapped around a purpose, I guess, and then people are attracted to that purpose.
A big vision, a great purpose, and then people will naturally gravitate towards that because they may have been waiting for you to set it up so they can come to you. And so you have to put it out there in a big way as well. And sometimes they form before you can even start to monetize it.
It's structured before because it's built momentum and it's attracted a cohort of people to it. Interesting.
And then on the other end, like my franchise, it was built as a networking business. It's an annual membership, blah blah blah, but a lot of other networks could be formed as a social, not necessarily a social enterprise, but a community that comes together, and then you realize there's the opportunity for you to monetize it, and then it becomes a kind of a business on its own as well. So there are ways of doing it. It depends on the area of interest. Yeah.
Really interesting. There you go, Romesh. We'll help you set one up.
Yeah. So Mike, there are lots of tech communities I'm sure you're aware of. And I had a client in Germany, an AWS provider, who were part, they just formed a really big kind of geeky tech developers, community, and it was growing and growing and growing until they realized that that community was not their buyers. And so then they worked with me to say, how do we buy? How do we have a community that's thriving at this, but these are C-suite buyers for our services, because that's what we sell. And so we had to look at how to make that work,
Interesting, really interesting. Yeah. I've not thought of it like this. So that's really interesting.
So tell us about your TED Talk, Maggie, because you covered a really interesting dual subject, really, emotional intelligence and AI, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, my life is always about the balance, coming into the middle. or bringing two opposing sides, knowing that even though they might look a bit different, there is a commonality, and you just need to have the right bridge for them. So the TED Talk, the title of the TED Talk delivered in 2022 is The Blurred Lines Between Human and Programmed Emotions. And in other words, the exploring the intersection of artificial intelligence and emotional intelligence as well. What do you want to know? It's all about.
What were your main kind of takeaways from that talk?
My takeaway, or in terms of my intention for that, was to plant a seed. I find myself quite a futurist when it comes to most of the talking things that I do, and so it was to plant a seed for us to realize the importance of a softer leadership or personal skill like emotional intelligence, and how it permeates every aspect of our lives, whether it's at home, at work, in leadership, in kind of driving organizations and businesses forward, how emotional intelligence plays a big part in it all, and how technologies, including AI, do not possess this innately human quality that, in a way, we have not been brought up or developed to bring it to the fore. And so the seed that I wanted to plant was to look at how we develop our human intelligence, our emotional intelligence, in such a way that we can work more effectively with the machines, with technologies. And the saying is that if we as humans can create technologies that can develop and grow on their own, make decisions on their own, then we definitely have the capacity and the capability to develop our human intelligence to a level where we can work with them so that it can give us the results we're looking for. So that was the thinking around it.
And what's your insight or future or your kind of future vision for what that would look like for companies, businesses, technology providers?
Yeah, so in the tech talk, I brought it back down because this was organized by a group of sixth formers. And so I brought it back down to the future of work. What does it look like, for them? And we are looking at, and I based a lot of that based on some MIT research at that time. In terms of the roles in the future that we're looking for. And I normally talk about three main roles, although they highlighted six, I kind of grouped them into three. One being an explainer, so someone who has developed their emotional intelligence in such a way that they can listen to, say, the tech person, the finance person, the sales and marketing person, the product person, and synthesize that information so that we get one line of communication that's understood by all. Because I think if we can do that, we can solve a lot of our problems in our businesses, and that affects both growth and productivity. So that's the explainer role. The other role is the role that's the trainer role. And again, emotionally intelligent enough to train our AIs, to understand things like sarcasm, to really train them to so for instance, like now that is more in action now, we see generative AI, how, ChatGPT might sometimes hallucinate because, we're just giving it too much and it doesn't know what to do. But an emotionally intelligent person who goes for this role of a trainer is able to train the AI to manage these scenarios so that they are more useful to us moving forward. And then there is the third role, which is more about, it's more related to, well, there's the policy one, so the ethics around it, making sure that the technologies are serving us, not just now, not just our organizations, but also future. But now we're looking at what is your local policy of AI within your organization to give people, the freedom to use AI, but also the protection and whatever is needed so that they can use AI and bring what you want to be brought into the organization. And then we talk about a role that is about vanity versus sanity projects, more tailored to our geek guys, and saying just because we can program it doesn't mean we should. And this is a way of avoiding some of the black holes that happen as well. So so there are different ways that we can look at that. But each of these future roles, which are currently now actually, all require us to be emotionally intelligent. We need to become more human in order to make sure that the machines are serving us in organizations and in our world.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Your first two categories particularly resonate with a piece of research I did last year. And we went and interviewed dog handlers. It was an AI project. And we went and interviewed dog handlers to understand how they train dogs and how they operate both in a military policing context, which is a fascinating experience because they, in effect, let the dogs make their own decisions and the dogs go. But the handler knows how to manage them and knows how to put them in context and knows how to feed them and keep them alive and all that sort of stuff. And for me, that analogy was amazing when we applied it to AI, because we started to go, what are we trying to do? We're trying to train them. We're trying to educate them, give them context so they know where they're best to operate and not operate. But actually, you can let them go then if you give them those kind of environments. So we were using that kind of crazy analogy to kind of really help people think about how they could build AI models and agents and apply them in different contexts, but also then take them home, model them, check they're working properly, look after them, that kind of thing in a much more human-centered way.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's always about the bridge, and again, it comes back to returning to ourselves, and then seeing how it allows us to create stuff within our businesses and within the world that serves us. I think in an ideal world, we should spend more time lying on the beach.
We have the best beaches to lie on with AI. Do you think that's one of the problems in sales and marketing as well, though, at the moment, is they're trying to wedge AI into all the areas possible and get technology solutions in rather than really thinking about the guardrails, the approach, the workflow, the benefits?
Yes.
And hence we're seeing at the moment lots of stats around ill-performing AI projects, not because they're not good AI tools, but they haven't worked out how they dock into the human workflow.
Exactly. Yeah. So they didn't initially kind of look at the strategy, the governance around it, what the problem is that they were solving, and whether their AIs were trained to really resolve that problem, and whether the humans were trained with the AIs, right? So things like prompt engineering. Are the humans asking the right questions? Are they putting the right workflow, the right solutions as part of the workflow processes, and when we don't have this, then we have these bottlenecks, or we will have, these use cases that spill out results that are quite far up from what we expected them to be. And it's because, something has not quite got right.
Automated email generation, automated marketing content, things like that. We see lots of challenges in that space, I think.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting discussion. And I think going back to what Mike said, it's almost like treating AI. Do you remember the Tamagotchis?
My goodness, Romesh, yeah, just I think.
I never had one. But those electronic little toys that you had to look after, they were essentially electronic pets, weren't they? And that's sorry, I had to get that out.
One of the things, a lot of the projects we work on in AI, and I think we've touched on this, is that the people who are getting the most value of it are those people who understand the roles and the jobs and the capabilities and the need the best. If you want a marketing plan, somebody who's written a marketing plan before will be the best person to use AI to get the best outcome from it. You want a good piece of new software developed really quickly, the software engineer will be the best person to get AI to do it. And what it's doing is it's speeding up those people who already understand what they're doing. It's not It's not allowing people who haven't got the skill sets to magically become really amazing software engineers and build applications in no time at all.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the people with the expertise who are almost like the conductors of the orchestra, aren't they?
Hence, I use the dog handler analogy. It's the same sort of logic.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. There's a lot to kind of unpack and think about there. But
do you think we should be training people differently then, Maggie, from an emotional intelligence perspective at schools and new to work, in what the future of work looks like, and in terms of the skill sets we're expecting to see?
Yeah, I think we don't necessarily talk about emotional intelligence as of course, not as a core curriculum at all, but even in normal life. I mean, we need it at home. And I think, it's innate. If you look at the basic definition, it's innate. But we kind of lose it. I mean, look at a little girl who's got their dad wrapped around their little finger. What do you think they're doing? They're using emotional intelligence, right? But we don't hone into it, and we don't develop it over time. The ability to put ourselves in someone's shoes, right? The ability to sense that we are different from other people, but also to really understand what makes this other person tick, and what within me that I can use, so we can always come and be in the middle. And I think if we are able to look at things that way and develop our emotional intelligence, that way, a lot of problems and miscommunications and, kind of conflicts in the workplace, conflicts at home, conflicts within organizations, a lot of them could be solved with that. But then it means that as we train people on developing their emotional intelligence better, when we're training AIs, we also have to look at how this emotional intelligence can be trained to the AIs, if you see what I mean. I know that's another topic altogether, and I know a lot of people are arguing that yes, AIs will have emotional intelligence, and in fact now people think that AIs have emotional intelligence in places like Japan. We're not going there, but I'm saying that yes, the more we can bridge this gap, the better our machines can do the work that are required of them more effectively, in a way that serves us, in a way that brings the efficiencies and the productivity and the growth that we want in organizations. And that frees us time to then come up with the ideations, right? Like your work, come up with great ideas that can be developed into something else, and that can help us more and more.
Yeah, really good. I like that. Lovely sum up of the whole conversation there around bringing back AI, emotional intelligence, and revenue all together. It's clever.
It's very nicely wrapped up, and lots of food for thought. As I mentioned, I think there's a lot to think about there, and some really powerful outcomes that could occur, not just for business but for society in general, if the changes you're talking about,
it's about that,
come through. So thank you so much for talking us through all of these areas, and we've covered quite a lot there. So I'd like to wrap up really by just asking you, what's next for you, Maggie?
What's next for me? A couple of things. From a business Mary's Consult perspective, is about honing into kind of the adoption of AI, what that means from a strategic perspective, and how that then filters down into the execution and the people, but how this brings in revenue as well, together. So that's one area that I'm focusing on with Mary's Consult. Very conscious that it's about keeping business as business, but not missing out on the opportunities. So enabling our clients to be able to always be ahead of the curve. And so I do things like the adaptability model, saying that the change models don't serve us now as much as they used to in the past, because we are in a very different world. So that's what's going on. On a personal level, I love creative writing. So the one Secret to Happiness, which is my book dedicated to our personal growth clients, is still going on. It's all about balance. And then I've just recently launched the Happiness Journal is a sequel to the book, but it can also be a standalone journal, just to, again, help people return to themselves. Who knows, they might be jotting their emotional intelligence experiences in there.
What a portfolio.
Yeah, lots of things to keep you busy, and certainly very engaged, I'm sure. So thank you again, Maggie, for all of the insights, for sharing all of your experience and expertise. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I think for me, one of probably the main thread I've got from this is the balance that you're seeking in all of these areas between human characteristics, emotions, expertise, and experience, and pairing them with technology or processes to have a more effective outcome. So that's probably a big takeaway for me, which is quite interesting. Mike, do you have other thoughts?
Yeah, I think you've summed that up really neatly there. I see what Maggie's doing and talking about is navigating what is actually a bunch of complex different topics and putting them together. And when we were trying to boil it down to KPIs and ROIs, you realise you can only do that to a certain extent, because of the world we live in is complex, and there are multifaceted angles that are pointing at your sales pipeline or your marketing or whatever you're trying to do in revenue generation. And I think it's being able to look at it from that triangular position that you're doing, Maggie, the individual, the processes, the emotional intelligence, the technology, all that is how you kind of develop a more robust pipeline and go-to-market strategy. And I think it's an interesting kind of multifaceted lens that you look on things with, Maggie.
Thank you. It's about developing, amazing leaders and founders who then allows the businesses and the people to grow with them, and big visions then become a reality. Interesting.
Very good.
What a good way to sign off there. So a massive thanks again, Maggie. Thank you for joining us as a brilliant guest today. I'd like to thank everyone for joining, listening, watching, and we hope that you enjoyed the discussion as much as we have. Strive and Thrive is a podcast for entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders. Please do like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.